Hello, and welcome back to an episode of 60 Minutes with Essie, Michaela, Alex, and Jake. In our 5 minute special today, we will be exploring the nature and value of emotions with star guests Charles Darwin and Paul Ekman. Now let's talk about what actually is emotion. Emotion is a subjective feeling that is directed towards some object. Characteristics of human nature are due to our advanced cognition. We notice emotion and show emotion through facial expressions and body language, which can help us communicate with others, whether that is verbally or even non verbally. Let's get into some background on who Charles Darwin is. He was born in 1809 in the United Kingdom. He was an English naturalist, geologist, and also a biologist. Darwin was best known for his theory of evolution by natural selection, which he published in 1859. We're actually here with him today. Let's ask him his beliefs on the evolutionary aspects of emotions and see what he has to say about them.
Hi, Charles Darwin. Thank you so much for joining us today on 60 Minutes, the 5 minute edition. Today, we were just wondering what your views on how evolution impacted emotions and how emotions came to be.
Yeah, so I believe that we evolved over time to motivate to approach objects that benefit us in terms of survival and reproduction. And over time, we also developed a fear of objects that will harm us. So, for example, that means we're really attracted to objects like an apple, for example, that'll feed us. But then we're scared of approaching objects like a snake, for example. That developed through the process of natural selection over time, and it really is now a basis of the emotions that we have today.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
Wow, that was great to hear from Darwin. Next, we're going to hear a little from Paul Ekman. He was an American psychologist born in 1934, and he pioneered the relation of emotions to facial expressions through his studies. Ekman and another psychologist, Wallace Friesen, traveled to a remote village in New Guinea to research if facial expressions were universal or learned. Let's ask a little bit about what they concluded and how they conducted these studies.
Hi, Mr. Eichmann. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Today on 60 Minutes, the 5 minute edition, we're going to ask you some questions about your study in New Guinea. Can you tell us why you did this study?
Me and my partner Wallace Friesen traveled to New Guinea and went to a secluded tribe from the rest of society, and we had read them stories, and we asked them to give the facial expression that matched the story. And what we learned from our study was that not only could they recognize, the 7 main emotions, they were universal throughout all different cultures, even though the tribe had been secluded from the rest of society.
Well, that's really interesting. What motivated you to do this study?
So me and my partner were really interested in, seeing and determining whether or not facial expressions were universal throughout all of, throughout the world. And one of our findings was that although facial expressions are universal, the extent into which you express the amount of emotion really comes down to your culture.
Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between cultures and how they express emotions?
Yeah, of course. Individualistic cultures are countries like the US and the UK, while collectivist cultures are more like Korea and Japan. And I would say the main difference is individualistic cultures really rely on self-expression. So people rely on using more emotion to express themselves.
Like body language?
Like body language, facial movements. And collectivist cultures, more rely on being, a little bit more mellow and, less expression and less extreme expression.
Is collectivist more situational experiences? So like your context of the situation, you can assume emotions a little better?
Yeah, that has a big role to play in it, and I think especially individualistic cultures really rely on, like I said prior, expressing themselves, and it's less about the situation for them, and for collective it's way more about the situation and their surroundings.
Interesting, thank you. Later in your life, you worked on the facial feedback hypothesis, which you're famous for. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. After my findings in New Guinea and further research, I had concluded the facial feedback hypothesis, which is that your facial expressions can actually help determine your emotions. For example, if you were to smile when you're in a bad mood, your smile could actually make you happier, and vice versa. If you're in a really good mood and you're frowning and acting sad, it can actually affect your mood and bring you down.
Wow, that's very interesting. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
In order for Paul Ekman to develop his facial feedback hypothesis, he actually took concepts from a different psychologist, William James. William James discovered the peripheral feedback theory, which is our body's internal reactions to certain stimuli, which then are reflected in our emotions. An example of this is when someone sees a bear, their heart begins to race and their body begins to tremble, which then generates the emotion of fear. All right, that concludes the end of our 5-minute edition here on 60 Minutes. We hope you all learned something new about the nature and the value of our emotions.